Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Guides to Inner Wellbeing and Mindfulness. My name is Amrit Shankar, and I will be moderating today's session. So before we get started, in order to respect everyone's privacy, please do not share any personal or contact information in the chat box. Okay. So today's session, we will start with a quick intro from each of the presenters, and then we'll be having a conversation about mindfulness, what it means, and the different guides to inner well-being. We encourage all of you to ask questions throughout the conversation and the dialogue. Questions may be asked in English or in French. To ask your question, please submit a question by text in the Q&A box in the toolbar in your presentation window in Feedloop. Please avoid using the chat to ask any questions. So a quick intro about myself. My name is Amrith, and I'm an ex-investment banker and adventure lover. I'm also a regular meditator. I started my meditation journey 9 years ago and enjoyed the massive benefits of a regular breathwork and meditation practice. I enjoy creating new mindfulness programs for people living with chronic diseases. And over the past 5 years, I've created several meditation and breathwork programs for multiple medical research projects. And with that, I'll pass the mic to Mira to introduce herself.
Thank you, Amrit. And thank you, everybody, for joining today's session. I'm very, very excited. My name is Mira. I am a fourth-year nursing student here in Toronto. And I'm also a nurse intern for the last 2 years at a multi-care kidney clinic and hemodialysis unit, also in Toronto. And on top of all of that, I really enjoy mindfulness, wellness. I have my own platform called The Wellevated on social media and a podcast called Mind Over Matter, which has been endorsed by the Government of Canada and the Duke of Ed organization. I started my mindfulness journey in 2019 when I first attended a meditation boot camp. And I was very interested. I wanted to receive all the benefits. And like everybody else who receives a lot of information all at once, I started my practice and slowly weaned off on it because I got too busy, et cetera, et cetera. But when the pandemic hit is when I really got interested. I started practicing when my anxiety was at an all-time high. There were a lot of things that's out of my control, and I wanted to really tune into my inner hardware. And so that's what I did. I took on a meditation practice, a regular meditation practice, and it changed my life. So I'm very excited today to talk to you about this breathing and meditation practice. We'll talk a little bit about the science today, and then we will delve into a body scan routine. We'll do a breathwork practice called the box breathing method. And I'll lead you into a little bit of a guided meditation and finally share some final techniques on how you can really have a good meditation / breathwork practice. So I'm really looking forward to it, and it's going to be wonderful connecting with everyone.
Great. Thank you, Mira. Sophie, if I could get you to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Amrit. Thanks, Mira. Also very honored and excited to be here with all of you today in this virtual realm. My name is Sophie. My pronouns are she, her. I live in Montreal, Quebec, which is also known as Tiohtià:ke in the Mohawk language. I am a certified forest therapy guide, certified with the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy, located mostly in California. And I'm also certified with the Global Institute of Forest Therapy. I got into this work in 2018, and I founded my own personal practice called Soft Earth Forest Therapy in Montreal, where I guide forest bathing and nature connection experiences. I'll get into all of that and what that is later in my presentation. But to kind of inform how I got into this, I have a BA in cultural anthropology from Concordia. So I've always been curious about humans, and especially the human experience with the natural world, or as I like to call it, the more than human world. So I pursue this curiosity through the powerful healing and really life-affirming connections fostered with the more than human world, and how this can support your mental well-being, physical well-being, and really improve your connection to yourself, those around you, and more broadly, the life that surrounds us. So that's a little bit about me. And just to be clear, I always like to say at the outset that I am a certified guide. I'm not a certified psychotherapist or a health professional. I simply help facilitate therapeutic experiences in nature. Nature is really the therapist there. So I'll pass it off to Mona.
Thank you. Thank you, Amrit. Thank you, everyone. I am also thrilled to be part of this session. So how I discovered mindfulness meditation? Well, I'm a physician, I'm a nephrologist. I trained in France and graduated 17 years ago, and I'm living and working in Quebec since more than 10 years now. So as part of my continuing medical education, which is mandatory for physicians, I enrolled in a meditation course, browsing through the courses which were proposed by Harvard Medical School in 2017. So the teacher was Daniel Brown. I was interested initially in filling up my own toolbox to overcome some stressful situations of personal and professional life, daily life. And how the practice landed in my life, where I couldn't have done a better choice, although I didn't know back in the day how useful that will be, because 6 months later, I was diagnosed with a breast cancer. Today, I'm a cancer-free survivor for 5 years, thanks to outstanding physicians who took care of me and who offered me the best treatments. I have been also supported by my friends, colleagues, family. Still, I had to deal with crippling negative emotions and thoughts, and especially the fear related to the chemo, the radiotherapy, and the multiple surgery. And really, there was no pill for that, or too much side effects with the pills I could get. For me, it was the hardest part of the journey, dealing with the fear, which was the core emotion, and the catastrophic thinking resulting from it. So it will go this way in my mind. What if it is a stage 4 cancer? What if the cancer is not curable? Am I going to die, leaving behind a 3-year-old? It was like a waterfall of negative emotions and thoughts, especially at night, depriving me from the precious rest I needed. So as the future was terrifying, I began simply to come back to the present moment. I decided to bring back my awareness to my breath. And this is exactly what mindfulness meditation is, developing present moment awareness, paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. So I will say it again. Developing present moment awareness is paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. And I'm quoting here Dr. Jon Kabat-Zinn. It is his definition. Jon Kabat-Zinn adapted and operationalized the Buddhist teachings dating 1,000 years of age to the evidence-based approach of Western medicine in North America in the early 80s. He developed mindfulness-based stress reduction clinics in the Massachusetts initially for patients with chronic pain resulting from cancer or other illnesses and refractory to all other treatments. The program was an 8-week session and resulted in an average of 30–50% reduction in pain and also in other somatic and psychological symptoms. So I do remember very precisely when I took the tool after the first chemo session, as I was lying down on the ground because I was so afraid and I was experiencing so much discomfort, fatigue, and pain, how I could soothe the physical and moral discomfort by working mindfully with my breath, and then also with visual imagery, which is another type of meditation, to help me envision a future healthy life. So as I was laying on the floor, I remember how Jon Kabat-Zinn said, as long as you are breathing, there is more right with you than wrong with you, no matter what is wrong. So I was still breathing. I could find hope. And I began to calm down by returning to my senses. So coming back to my body helped me accept the diagnosis, but also my vulnerability, be it physical or psychological. I began to navigate mindfully the triangle of my emotions, thoughts, and behavior. So I could more easily ask for help, let go of, the performance mindset, all things which were from the past and will not serve me anymore. So here arrived acceptance, letting go, resilience, empowerment. So those were the results of this practice. Physical and moral pain have been for me the portal to a higher level of consciousness. And I integrated in my daily life formal mindfulness meditations, so focusing on my breath or the sounds around me or the whole physical sensations through a body scan. You will see that later with Mira. And also informal mindfulness, meaning mindfulness in everyday life, while I was eating, walking, maybe parenting, showering, washing dishes. So be there in the moment in what I was doing. And also self-compassion, which is another form of meditation. So really, these tools were life-changing for me. I also practiced yoga, which is mindful meditation in movement, yeah. And it was with wonderful, highly trained teachers in oncologic yoga. I'm going to name them Candice Labbé and Laura Hernandez, because those courses were offered free of charge by the Fondation Québécoise du Cancer du Sein to women suffering from a breast cancer. And yoga has been shown to help cancer patients dealing with the anxiety and the stress of aggressive treatment, and also regain flexibility and strength. So this practice and this experience of illness changed not only my life, but also my professional practice. Because when I ended the first year and a half of treatment, I came back to work, and then I had to make sense of that experience. I could now better understand what that means to live with a chronic disease and the side effects of life-saving but aggressive treatments, having experienced it in my body. So you see, my patients undergoing dialysis, they were exactly living the same pattern every day. I realized that for me, coming back to a normal life implied engaging in mindfulness meditation, because it helped me engage differently with my thoughts and emotions. And also, I practiced physical activity more regularly to improve my global health. So I could, with that, translate all these experiences in another type of approach and counseling with patients. So I began to develop programs for dialysis patients and also for healthcare professionals as the COVID pandemic hit, by the way. It was programs based on mindfulness or yoga. Eventually, I enrolled in a master in mental health a few months ago at McGill University here in Montreal to learn and conduct research projects using mind-body approaches to improve mental health outcomes in chronic kidney diseases and dialysis patients. So for today, my intention really is to engage in a conversation with curiosity and a beginner's mind. And also what I want you to take away is that mindfulness meditation is not a magical tool. It was not the cure for breast cancer. It's not the cure for chronic kidney disease or any disease. And maybe it's not for everybody. It's not mandatory to practice mindfulness. There are a lot of other tools out there. There are also some contraindications like acute psychosis, major depressive episodes. But what I want you really to take away is, as long as you are breathing, there is more right with you than wrong with you, no matter what is wrong. I am quoting again John Kabat-Zinn. So If you are going through a turmoil, you can always come back to your breath, to the life movement. You are not your pain. You are not your disease. You are not your thoughts. You are much more than that. And you have a huge reservoir of unknown resources inside of you that you can access by engaging differently with your thoughts and emotion. It's okay to be afraid, even terrified. You can still breathe and calm your mind and not engage in the catastrophic thinking that follows the core emotion of fear. You can still calm your mind with your breath. So later on, I will lead in French a mindfulness practice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mona, for sharing all that with us. That's very, very helpful to our viewers today. So following that, I'd like to present with all of you a medical research program being conducted out of the University of Alberta. And the researchers had reached out to me and would have had requested me to present the information to all of you. So this is a 12-week mind-body wellness program that's conducted by an online digital platform. And it goes through various mind-body wellness practices such as yoga, tai chi, and chair-level exercises, and also includes psychology-based coping skills. This is for people living with different chronic diseases, and currently they're enrolling participants onto the program. If you'd like to enroll onto this program, you could send an email to the email on the slide, empower@ualberta.ca, or you could scan the QR code and there's a little registration form that you can fill out that will allow you to then enroll onto this program. To add, this program is free of charge, so there is no cost associated with this program, and it's completely online via a web platform, so you can complete the program at your comfort in your homes. The only thing, I guess, the research group asked for is a certain number of minutes or hours per week so that you could follow along the different practices that they've made available to you through this online platform. So with that, I'd like to take the opportunity now to have a bit of a dialogue with our presenters, so Mona, Mira, and Sophie. And some of the points that I personally went through when I started my wellness practices a few years ago that I thought we could talk about, which would be beneficial to our listeners today. So perhaps I could start with Mira, and I know you touched upon how you got into the practice of mindfulness and meditation. And could you talk a little bit more about how you were able to integrate the practice into your daily routine, which all of us find so difficult to do in our time-crunched day-to-day lives?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. I think we're looking at the application of how we can take such a beautiful practice and, implement it into our day-to-day lives. When I started working on practicing this during the pandemic, I was only able to, sit down for 1 minute at a time. And that you'll notice if you've ever tried to do a breathing or mindfulness practice, it's quite challenging. And the key here is that it's a practice and it's not a performance. You're doing it to get better at it. And so, if you choose to sit down every day for just 1 minute, whether it be in the morning when you just wake up or at night before you go to bed, or sometimes even just doing it a minute before you have each meal, it's very implementable. You can start with 1 minute and you can choose to go up here. I always tell people that it's better to do 1 minute every day than doing a 30-minute practice once a month. And so, you can incorporate this into your everyday life if you choose to do a little bit of a breathing practice. Take 5 deep breaths before you, start a next task. Or if you're sitting on a subway or if you're sitting in public transit, sitting in traffic, just choose to, hone in on that inner hardware. Take a few deep breaths and it can make a huge difference.
That's so interesting because a common misconception a lot of people that I've at least personally come across is they need to be in a particular seated posture. They need to be wearing a certain type of clothing before they could start the practice. And that is not true at all. We could pretty much do it at any point during a day as long as we're in a safe situation.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, great. And at the moment, I guess you mentioned about a minute to two every day, but typically over a period of time, does that practice extend to a few minutes, a few times a day? What is the typical trajectory of such a practice?
Yeah, so I would say figure out what works for your lifestyle, what works for your time. For myself currently, I do 5 minutes. So 5 minutes is more than enough time for me to really feel like I'm in control, really focus in on how I'm feeling. So I would suggest, find what works for you. This is a beautiful practice. You can mold it to your own lifestyle and it doesn't have any restrictions.
So great, amazing. So we have no reason not to do the practice. It's so easy available to us. Okay, great. So I'd like to talk about some of the contraindications, and maybe Mona, if I could get your thoughts on this one. What should people be aware of when they start such a practice? Are there any contraindications, something that they need to be aware of?
Yeah, classical contraindications are maybe acute psychosis or a very severe depressive episode, although mindfulness could be used as part of a psychotherapeutical approach, but we need a medical advice. So if a person has some issues with mental health, maybe it's better to talk with her physician before engaging in the practice. And another thing is that when we meditate, sometimes we access some very deep and negative emotions coming back from the past because we access some of the subconscious mind. So there is a phenomenon which is described, which is called the dark night of the soul. And sometimes it happens during retreats. And the teachers in meditation retreats are very aware of that. So they know how to manage that, but sometimes during a long, say, silent retreat or of 7 and 10 days, some things will emerge. And maybe a person will feel a lot of distress, will cry, and it is a lot of repressed emotions which will go outside. But this happens in these kinds of settings usually. But usually it's a safe thing. Another good thing to do is to try to enroll in a program, because like that you will be guided and you will have someone who will teach you, because we need teachings. We need in clear, practical, simple instructions. And even if it is simple, it's not easy, as you have said, Mira. It's not easy even for you, who is kind of a professional of the meditation practice. It's not easy.
So when these negative emotions or feelings do come up, can people just stop the practice and then kind of put it on hold till they seek some medical advice and then restart it? Would that be the suggestion?
Oh, that's very good questions. So first of all, when a negative emotion emerges, something very easy to do to begin with is to offer yourself some self-compassion, just to acknowledge that yes, I'm feeling a lot of sadness, or maybe it is because someone, a very close parent or friend died recently, and then all the sadness and the grief related to that is coming back. So sometimes offer yourself a lot of self-compassion and recognize that it is okay to feel that. And then try to remember that a negative emotion sometimes lasts only 90 seconds. So it's temporary. It's not going to last forever. We can see sometimes young children, when they get into a tantrum, a lot of discomfort is coming because it seems like they think that they are not going to go away from that. It's going to last forever, but it's not true. it can be only a few seconds. And of course, you can stop the practice, breathe, and then you can also call a friend or search some comfort with someone.
Okay, that's so good to hear. Okay, so I'm really curious to hear a little bit more about forest therapy, and maybe Sophie, I'll call you in here. The question that's coming to my mind is this available to different groups of people, across ages, across different conditions? If you could talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I was trained in forest therapy specifically, but more broadly, I mean, I'm going to be speaking about nature connection and the therapeutic benefits of connecting to the natural world, which can be accessed wherever you are. So I'm going to speak more on this in the presentation, but even from your home, if you don't have much mobility, even looking out a window at a natural setting, at maybe you live in an urban environment and there might just be one tree there. Maybe it's your house plant. It's really, and this is why all of us speaking together, Mira and Nona, and myself, it is a form of mindfulness. So it's a kind of applied mindfulness that's very accessible in that our senses are aware, our eyes are open, we're really engaging. So it's an embodied practice. And in that way, it's very much accessible. If you love gardening, of course, I'm going to be speaking specifically to the specific benefits of connecting to nature in forest environments, because some elements are different there and kind of you reap the greatest benefits. But this can be practiced, yes, gardening, walking down the city street, walking in your city park. And I'll offer some tools of they're really mindfulness-based tools of slowing down, paying attention, opening your senses. So yes, I'm right, very much. It's a super accessible practice and can be done in the middle of downtown Montreal if you really slow down and pay attention.
Okay, so quote unquote, it's nature therapy. So it's available to everyone. So amazing. Okay, I'm just receiving a question in the chat here. So the question is the research program recruiting participants primarily over the age of 50? I believe yes. The answer to that is yes. So it is available to participants living with chronic disease over the age of 50. Okay. So coming back to our quick dialogue here, I know we're at time, but I'd like to add in one final question to all three of you. And I personally find setting an intention is really good. So if there was one learning, one key point, one practice, however long or short, everyone can take away today, what would that be? So perhaps Mira, you could start, and then we could pass it on to Mona and Sophie.
Sure. So I think one of the big things that I've taken away from my own mindfulness practice is that there's a lot of freedom in choosing how you practice. And when the more and more you choose to practice this, you'll notice that there are some changes, very minute or very big. It can vary. And there's this quote that I like to draw upon. It says that between stimulus and response, there lies a space. And in that space, there's a power to choose a response and growth and freedom. And so I highly encourage you, as you do this practice, really take some time at the end of your practice to reflect. It can make a huge difference.
So amazing. Great. How about you, Mona?
For me, what is life-changing is really the quote of John Kabat-Zinn when he says, as long as you are breathing, there is more right with you than wrong with you, no matter what is wrong. So the breath is always here with us. So we can always go back to the breath. We don't need any props. We don't need anything. And also we are not our thoughts, and we are not what is coming bad or whatever is coming, whatever life is throwing to our head, we are still something else. So come back to your breath, and as exactly you said, Mira, then that will create the space where we can find our resources and then find new solutions.
Amazing. Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you, Sophie?
Yeah, so my intention really for this session is to share the background of this practice and, more importantly, how you may may be able to incorporate some of these elements into your daily life really immediately. And since Mona and Mira were both sharing quotes, my favorite quote that I always come back to and that I know off by heart is by the nature poet Mary Oliver. And in one of her most famous poems, she says, "You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves." So
Mhm.
in that sense, she's really speaking about, that love and attention and connecting to the natural world. So allowing yourself to really feed into that and to allow yourself to be curious and to lean into that wonder.
Great. Okay, what a great conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Um, so we're all excited to experience what you have in store for us. So with this, I will hand it over to you, Sophie, for your presentation.
All right. Okay, so as you know, I'll be speaking on forest therapy and more broadly on nature connection and the health benefits of this kind of practice. You can go on to, oh, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. I don't know if I'll be able to see them, but perhaps at the end, Amrit might be able to help me facilitate some of any of those questions you might have. So I always like to do a land acknowledgement, even when we're in this virtual realm with people from all across the country. So my home is Montreal, and in the Mohawk language, it's Tijage. It's the traditional and unceded Ganyankahaga territory. So since it's a land-based practice and nature-based practice, I always like to acknowledge where I live and play and where I have the privilege of being. And the name for Montreal in Ganyankahaga in the Mohawk language is where the group divided or parted ways. So Montreal is a very important gathering place for many First Nations communities. Being an island, as you can see on the map there, was easily accessible from the St. Lawrence River. So even in this virtual realm, just wanted to locate where I am and where I get to live and play. Next slide. So I got into this a little bit, but I just wanted to delve into it a bit more of what drew me to this practice. So of course, I'm going to be going into what this practice is soon after. But I really find that this quote encapsulates part of what drew me to this practice. So in the end, we will conserve only what we love. We will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught. So in a sense, if we conserve what we love and love what we understand, but can only understand what we are taught, then perhaps the pathway to help people conserve and love our earth and protect it is through learning how to connect to it, because we protect what we love. So that connection piece was a big part of it. And this kind of stemmed from some anxiety and grief I was feeling with the climate catastrophe and how to make a difference. And I really found that it was through connecting to the wonder of nature and helping people to find that really that is where we may be galvanized to protect it and to act. Another thing that drew me to this practice is that I really found it at the intersection of many of my interests and skills back in 2018. So I'd been exploring mindfulness meditation since 2016, reading lots, reading nature poetry like Mary Oliver, and the power of language and poetry in shifting how you see the natural world really struck me. Also intersected with my curiosity about natural history, about urban nature also. And like I said before, my anxiety about the climate crisis. So I really found it to be a perfect combination of many of these things. It's also very accessible. Like I answered in the question before, there's really no level of skill or knowledge or fitness necessary to practice this kind of nature connection. It's a preventive physical and mental health practice, which I'll get into later in the presentation. It's an embodied practice, which was important to me, as opposed to being more strictly intellectual. And while all of these, any way of connecting to nature has its benefits, that embodiment element appealed to me. And lastly, it's really a path of environmental engagement and my form of activism, because with all that we face, this was an important element for me because yes, like in the quote, we conserve what we love and what we feel connected to. So that element, establishing that foundational connection to the natural world, is really what will bolster us to be galvanized and to make the changes that we need to protect our beautiful home that supports us. Next slide, please. So I'm going to quickly invite you to close your eyes for a bit of an immersive experience. Feel free to turn off your camera for the next few minutes if you feel it might help you relax. So if you feel comfortable to do so, I invite you to close your eyes. And if that's not comfortable, you can just keep a downward looking gaze, maybe a few feet in front of you. I invite you to take a few deep breaths, maybe in through the nose and out through the mouth. If you want to sigh, go ahead. You're muted, so feel free to let it go. I invite you to feel into your body without judgment. And simply notice how your weight feels where you are seated. See how your chair feels beneath you. Now, continuing to breathe, I invite you to notice how the air feels as it enters your nose or mouth. How it feels as it enters your lungs. You might notice how your chest rises and falls. Next slide. You're now keeping your eyes closed, if that's comfortable for you. I simply invite you to listen. Next slide. Keeping eyes closed if that's comfortable. If your mind wanders, just come back to what you are hearing. I invite you to slowly blink your eyes open. And with eyes open, I invite you just to observe the trees. What are you noticing? It may be the play of light and shadow. It might be gentle movement. It might be the flexibility and swaying of these tree trunks. And the beautiful saturation, color of the leaves and the sky. Next slide. So I just wanted to awaken our senses a little bit with this quick nature immersion, virtual nature immersion, before getting into things. Because this innate connection to nature is in all of us, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. So this pull or attraction to the natural world can be better understood through the term biophilia, which means love of life and the living world. So this term was coined by the American biologist E.O. Wilson in 1984, which means love of life and the living world. So in this, as you know, written in this quote by Richard Louv, we are hardwired to love the natural world. It is literally encoded in our DNA because we evolved in nature for 99.99% of human history. We have a biological need to connect with it, and we have learned to love the things that helped us to survive. So this is really an innate connection here, whoever you are and wherever you live. Next slide. Okay, so what is forest therapy, also known as forest bathing? Don't worry, you don't need a swimsuit for it. Next slide. So a brief definition that I've written is that forest therapy, it's founded on the Japanese practice of Shinrin-yoku, which translates directly to forest bathing, that Japanese term. Forest therapy is a slow and immersive experience in nature, centered on experiencing your surroundings, the life therein, and the present moment with all of your senses. So very much a mindful practice in natural environments. Next slide. So forest therapy, as I said, is a therapeutic practice combining Shinrin-yoku, which translates to forest bathing. And for the brief history of the practice, it evolved in the 1980s in Japan from the intuitive idea that being in the forest would be good and healing for the people of Japan. This emerged especially at a time when levels of stress and overwork were rising amongst the population and deeply affecting their well-being. So this intuitive idea of the healing power of the forest was confirmed as the beginnings of the practice coincided with scientific studies and research that was being released and published at the time in Japan that was exploring the benefits of the natural world and just what being in natural forest environments does for our physical and mental health. There was also a conservation slant to Shinrin-yoku, with it being part of a campaign to protect the forests. So again, this theme, if people are encouraged to visit forests for their health, they may be more likely to want to protect and look after them because we protect what we love, as Jacques Cousteau famously said, in reference to the ocean, of course, that it applies to so much. The practice was very much influenced by Japan's two major religions, Shinto and Buddhism, which in turn were also informed by the vast and impressive forests on the island. I don't know if you know, but Japan is covered by forests. 68% of the country is covered in forests. So it's quite remarkable and makes sense that the practice emerged there. So Shinto and Buddhism, so these religions helped inform the practice, and by no means, that this practice is very much not religious, but the religions helped inform the practice and help understand the cultural and religious kind of connotation and understanding of why it emerged in Japan by inviting the notion of what's called animacy into it, which basically means that all life on Earth is living, is sentient, and possesses its own kind of intelligence, and should be respected and engaged with as such. And so these cultural and religious lenses are important to consider when considering how it emerged in Japan. So it's also a therapeutic practice combining indigenous ways of connecting to the natural world. So as I said, forest therapy engages this kind of animistic worldview, which is typical to indigenous cultures the world over. And this way of engaging with the natural world is really innate in all of us, but has been preserved within indigenous cultures across the world. So many indigenous friends across Turtle Island have generously shared some of their teachings and ways of being, which have helped inform this practice and are recognized through the organization that I work with, the Global Institute of Forest Therapy. So this therapeutic practice is really an innate way of being. As I explained before with biophilia, we're part of the natural world in which we evolved, which we know, but we need these reminders, and that we long for this return, excuse me, and reconnection, whether we consciously realize it or not. Lastly, it's very much science-backed, evidence-based practice, with much of the studies on forest bathing specifically emerging from Japan and South Korea, but the literature on the benefits of nature connection are vast and cover the globe. Next slide. Pardon me, I'm not used to talking for this long, so my throat's getting dry. So what happens on a forest therapy walk? What does it look like? So essentially it's 1.5 to 3 hours long. ideally in a forest environment, but it can be done, like I said before, in any area in nature. It can be a city park. You can do it along the beach, but it just might look a little bit different there. So I'm just speaking specifically to forest therapy. So participants are guided through a series of sensory-based activities, which are called invitations. So these activities are really intended to help people slow down, drop into your senses. So what are you seeing? What are you smelling? What are you hearing? What are you feeling? And maybe less so, what are you tasting, depending where you are. Tasting the air, perhaps. And yeah, these invitations help you to connect and explore your surroundings really in that sensorial way and less intellectually. It's not about identifying things. Why is that important? It's really about exploring your surroundings with your senses and following that curiosity. So the walk pulses between individual time exploring and coming back together in a group to explore collectively what we're noticing. And it's important in that it gives us each a chance to really listen, be heard in this way. It helps deepen and integrate participants' experiences and really helps to create a very special bond within each of the participants. And the walk ends with the sharing of tea, as in this little photo here. It's the last step in fully experiencing the forest. So the idea is that you're really experiencing this environment with all of your senses, and to ingest it, and to ingest a tea that's made from a local native edible plant, ideally foraged where the walk took place. It's the last step in really incorporating the forest into your body and allowing it to nourish you. Next slide. Okay, so the essential elements of the practice, like I said, it's a sensory experience and not an intellectual one. I need to start talking more, I guess. I'm so dry. The pace is slow and the distance covered is minimal. So yeah, this isn't a hike. Sometimes we'll cover less than a kilometer, maybe 500 meters at most, because the focus is really on exploring your immediate surroundings. There's a nice expression I like. It's go twice as slow and see twice as much, because when you really slow down, there's such a wealth to explore, and you really tap into that childlike curiosity, which as adults is very important for us. It's important for us to be curious and to play in that way. And in modern life, we don't often get that chance. So being in the present moment, orienting to pleasure. So that's an important one as well. And the word pleasure can kind of be a taboo word in ways, but it's so important in that these sensorial pleasures really help to calm the nervous system and lead to some of the benefits of this practice. So the simple sensorial pleasures of, how the air feels against your skin, how it smells, how the sensation is under your hands of moss or tree bark, all of these elements really help to make the practice what it is. Gratitude and reciprocity are really important in it as well. And reciprocal being that with all we are receiving from these forest environments, what we're giving back is really this gift of attention and connection and caring for a place, and the gift of really developing a relationship and wanting to care for a place. And I always like to say, to be careful that this is not another extractive practice of simply going into nature to feel better. But of course, this is an amazing side effect, which I will get into. Next slide. So the benefits of connecting to nature. So during a forest therapy walk, our body's parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest state, really takes over. And this is why being in nature is an incredible form of preventative medicine, because it's in this parasympathetic state, this rest and digest state, a relaxed state when our bodies can truly rest and heal and repair themselves. Next slide. So to start with the physiological benefits, stress reduction is one of the biggest things. As most of you probably know, it's one of the most important because chronic stress makes us more vulnerable to disease, and is one of the leading causes of illness in modern society. So that reduction in stress really helps pave the way for all of the other benefits. And studies have shown that only 20 to 30 minutes of a forest therapy walk, or really spending slow, mindful time in nature, is the time it takes for cortisol levels to begin to drop. And when people report feeling calmer, happier, more connected, amongst other benefits. And even in some trails in Japan, they take your cortisol levels at the beginning of the walk and the end, so your stress levels, just to demonstrate how much of a calming experience it is. Reduced blood pressure, reduced heart rate, increased heart rate variability, which means that the circulatory system can respond well to stress. Accelerated recovery from illness or surgery. One study that I like to cite that some people might know is a study of patients in a hospital that were recovering from the same surgery. Half of them had a view from their hospital window of a forest, and the other half had a view of a brick wall. So same surgery, they took into account all the demographic details, age, health, and the findings were really statistically significant, as those with a view of the trees healed faster, used less pain medication and less potent medication, and were generally more positive in the nurse's notes. And this study has been replicated many times and in different places as well, such as in prisons, where views and connection to nature resulted in decreased medical visits. It strengthens your immune system. And this is through being in this state of relaxation, as stress can inhibit immune function. And another element of strengthening the immune system is the effects of phytoncides, which are volatile compounds released by some coniferous trees, which I'll explain about in a little bit. And a lot of these benefits I've seen firsthand with my walk participants. You can see them on the testimonials page of my website. And a friend of mine, a woman who has been coming as a regular to my walks for 2 years, and a good friend of mine, had been undergoing cancer treatment for stage 3 ovarian cancer. And forest therapy has been a key part of her healing, as the benefits can really be felt immediately. And I'm very happy to report that she is cancer-free. I'm not saying it's forest therapy, but I'm saying that this has been an important part of her treatment. Next stage. Slide. Cognitive benefits. So broadly, forest therapy is an accessible kind of contemplative mindful practice, as well as a preventative health practice, which not only makes you feel calmer and soothes your nervous system, but increases your connection to yourself, others, and the earth and its beings. So many of these effects can be felt immediately, and again, can be seen in some of the testimonials from participants that have come on my walks. I can personally vouch for each of these benefits, as it is also my personal mental health struggles and experience with depression that led me to this practice, and which are really invaluable to my well-being. I won't go through all of them, but just speaking on creativity, I have to say that I've never written as much poetry and had such great revelations and realizations as when I do when I'm sitting at my sit spot in nature. And we're really just scraping the surface of all of these benefits, so it's an exciting time. Next slide. So this is a quote from one of my favorite authors, David Abram, that humans are tuned for relationship. The eyes, the skin, the tongue, ears, and nostrils, all are gates where our body receives the nourishment of otherness. So in other words, if our bodies are the vessels with which we experience this world, it's through our senses that we're able to do so. So what are these sensory elements in nature that make us feel so good? Next slide. Okay, so I'm realizing I'm getting short on time, so I'm going to go through these pretty quick. So sight, it's our most dominant sense. So some of the elements in nature that can lead to these benefits are fractal structures in nature. So repeating patterns that really allow us to find relaxation in nature's fractal structures. Soft fascination, which I like to describe kind of like, when you think of fascination, you might think of a hockey game, and it's fascinating, it's fast-paced, but soft fascination is engages a kind of involuntary attention. We pay attention differently in nature. So the soothing sights and sounds capture our attention effortlessly and really give our mental resources a break. Awe is a big one, one that I love and one that I've been exploring recently. There's lots of amazing research coming out with that. And awe simply means, getting lost in the beauty and wonder of the world. So that feeling of experiencing something beyond our understanding of the world. Colors. So the most restful colors for the human mind are the blues and greens found in nature. They make us less anxious and stressed, while on the other hand, the grays of urban landscapes have been shown to make us unhappy and more aggressive. Next slide. We'll skip this slide because time is running out. So hearing, so these are the most calming sounds to the human ear. So gently moving water, the wind in the trees, bird song. So these are the clips that I played at the beginning. So they reduce our blood pressure and heart rate, reduce our stress, improve mood, cognitive functions, concentration, sleep. And these are the sounds that we've evolved with and we've become accustomed to for thousands of years. Next slide. So the smells in nature. So phytoncides, as I alluded to before, they're antimicrobial organic compounds that are released by coniferous trees. And these phytoncides are really part of a tree's immune system in that they're released when a tree detects a threat, such as a beetle or a fungus. And when we inhale these phytoncides, they interact with our bodies in a similar way in that they boost our immune system as well as natural killer cells. Now, all this research is well-founded, and natural killer cells are a type of white blood cell that can attack and kill unwanted cells, helping to fend off viruses, tumors, and so on. And studies by Dr. Cheng Li in Japan have shown that 3 hours of forest therapy can boost levels of natural killer cells for a whole week. And 3 days of an immersion in forest environment can lead to higher level of natural killer activity for a whole month. So soil is another one. There's a bacteria in soil that increases serotonin, the feel-good neurotransmitter in our brains, which also boosts our immune system. Negative ions are essentially oxygen atoms with an extra negatively charged electron. So that amazing, invigorating feeling you have when you're next to a waterfall or a stream, or if you're in a forest or up in the clouds on a hike. So there's really a name for this. And this is where air molecules break up. And studies have shown that they improve our mood, our sense of well-being. They increase oxygen flow to our brain, which helps with alertness and mental energy. Next slide. So there's a whole bunch of elements that are at play when we're in forest environments. So that's why I want to go sense by sense, understanding what is it that's causing me to feel so relaxed and to boost my immune system. We're getting to an exciting time in that nature is really being seen as a key component to health, and that more and more health officials across the world and in Canada are proclaiming nature as really being that fourth pillar of health, along with exercise, sleep, and a healthy diet. And these remarkable studies of the health benefits of nature have had such an impact. As you may know, that doctors across the world have been prescribing time in nature for their patients. And this is happening in Canada with PRX. Next slide. So how do you practice this? Now, again, I don't know if I'll be able to share this slide presentation with all of you afterwards because I know time's running out, but just how do you practice some of this right away? So number one, find a park, forest, or green space, backyard, and go when it's not too busy. Turn your phone off, tuck it away. Walk slowly, don't be shy to really engage each of your senses, especially touch. Walk slowly while exploring what's around you with a childlike curiosity. And every time you notice something, you can consider that you've essentially been invited into connection with and by whatever you're seeing, that plant or tree or stone. When your mind wanders, simply come back to what your senses are noticing. So really focusing on your senses, coming back to the present moment and going slowly. For about 20 or 30 minutes or so, you'll really start to feel some of these benefits. or even sitting for that amount of time with your full attention on the world around you, or lying down. Lying down is amazing in the forest. Next slide. Of course, bathing at home. So if this isn't accessible to you for whatever reason, energy, or wherever you're located, you can experience some of these benefits by simply diffusing essential oils from coniferous trees, adding plants to your indoor space that might purify the air and that you can engage with and explore and just be curious about, even if it sounds silly. Really just tuning into that sense of wonder and exploring, the veins on the leaves, and watching a leaf bloom and unfurl, listening to nature soundscapes. There's tons of beautiful nature soundscapes on YouTube, as some of the videos I showed at the beginning. Having a view of nature, so through a window. Right now I'm looking at a bunch of fir trees here, or even an image of nature. Your screensaver on your laptop, on your TV, on your phone, even that can tune into that wiring. Next slide. Some resources, book recommendations. I'm a big nerd. I love reading all about this. I love reading poetry and as much as the scientific studies of the benefits of nature connection. And next slide. So one of my favorite quotes by Bayo Akomolafe, a Nigerian philosopher: "The times are urgent. Let us slow down." I don't know if we have time for questions, but I thank you for your attention and your curiosity, and looking forward to the sessions with Mona and Mira.
Thank you, Sophie, for that wonderful presentation. So fascinating to learn about the benefits, especially of connecting with nature.